so much for being here. This is like not a classic drill or traditional theater experience, so thank you so much for your patience, for the grilled cheese and everything, and maybe make more afterwards if you want one. Don't tell me if they're bad. But this experience was a Bit Tuary was built out of wanting to collaborate with Dena. Dena's from New York. Dena came here to be a part of this. And all of these monologues are something that Dena can talk about more.
Yeah, for sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Dena Igusti. I am an Indonesian Muslim writer born and raised in Queens, New York City. A Bit Tuary kind of came out of the concept of understanding grief as a form of archive, understanding what it means to be a part of communities that are constantly in proximity to loss, right? I grew up in New York City where it has been increasingly gentrified ever since I was a kid. And there are so many aspects of that where a lot of gentrification and other forms of displacement have always meant death and have always meant loss, where like I've had people like where I grew up where they would be evicted, and then afterwards they'd pass away shortly after due to houselessness, due to health issues that kind of like surround that. And also in a similar fashion of being Indonesian, where a lot of us came to Queens around late 80s, early 90s. There was always this concept of constantly holding on to things. Like my family would hold on to so much, right? Like there would be like a TI-83 calculator manual. And my mom still has it, and I don't have the calculator. I don't have the calculator. My mom's like, just in case, because maybe your cousin might get it, and then he might lose the manual, and then we'll hold on to it. But that was something that was always present in New York City. But then whenever I would go back to my mom's home country, back to Indonesia, it was a thing where if we didn't want something, we wouldn't hold on to it. It's like, oh, if you don't want it, you can like just throw it away. You can like, you don't need to keep it. But then in New York City, we just held on to everything, because what if we lose everything? And especially as someone who's also briefly experienced homelessness, like we held on to as much as we could as possible. So Bit Tuary kind of stems from that, of what does it mean for people who utilize different forms of objects or different remnants of things that they hold on to. How do they use that as a form of archive, as a form of holding on to their own histories or their own stories of their own people? And what does that like fully look like? Like some of these monologues you'll see, they will be a screenshot of text messages. Some of them will be a shirt that says Cape Cod from like their mom, and their mom is not from Cape Cod, you know, they went once. So a lot of that is going to be, so a lot of it is really just that exploration of when you are not granted the privilege of documentation, and when you are not granted the privilege of archiving. We're seeing that now, right? We're seeing that with the current genocide in Palestine. We're seeing not only the constant deaths of all these people, but we're seeing this constant loss of archives, because there is this like forced elimination of people that also means not having their stories told. And in other forms of displacement that's been held as a result of the British and US Empire, and just other Western colonial empires, we're seeing that in terms of archives being official documents, just being constantly done. We've already seen them be eliminated for generations. So what do we kind of utilize to kind of safehold that? What do people who are of migrant communities have to use to kind of navigate archive instead? So, yeah.
So in terms of timeline, these interviews happened like last month, and these actors were asked to join this project like a week or two ago. So have grace with everybody. We just ran through it earlier today, and it was beautiful. We're going to start with Amal. Thank you.
I feel like, especially in Indonesian culture, it's almost as if we've been prepped for grief all of our lives, only because it's so natural. It's kind of like casual dinner talk. You know, like, you could eat dinner, suddenly your mom's like, how's your day? By the way, you know I'm not gonna be here forever, right? Or she'll show you a necklace she bought when she was 25, then she'll go, after I die, if you are ever in trouble, you could sell my necklace. Growing up in that, especially as a woman, watching your mother lose parts of herself that you'll never get to meet because of motherhood. Maybe not even motherhood, maybe just dealing with an unreliable husband diminishing her. You just watch and accept. You have to. Talking so casually about death or preparing preparing your kids for death since they were 4. It's not that weird if you're not American or grew up in just American culture. Talking about it is so common, but you don't really have a lot of it, like sources to really talk about it. No one is going to grief counseling after someone dies, and a lot of our elders, they die after 55. We have a really short lifespan. It's like accepted, but not. It's almost like, what's the word, like it's taboo to really get into detail about it. In a lot of ways, it feels like I'm not preparing for death, but loss of some man who will leave. My father, he's physically in the house, but he sits on the couch, empty-eyed, tuned out to my mom's current state and her inability to walk and function like she used to. He just waits for his food to be served and his clothes to be washed as if nothing changed. But I feel like he left my mom years ago, maybe before me. Shit, I don't know. My mom had a stroke, and now she's immobile on her left side. And my dad won't take care of her, even though he proclaims he's the man of the house or whatever. So I work at a shitty Zionist jewelry shop to make rent. For me, I'm grieving a life that I never got to live. You know, it's like people think grieving is lost, a dead body, maybe, but a lot of it can be potentially grieving a life that you envisioned, but never happened. I'm sure my mother was a woman who had dreams, you know, and wanted to do more than just being a breadwinner, being a wife, and going the traditional route. And I just see her not having a life where she could just relax, you know? And even like, for instance, like if you guys mentioned, like, what kind of object would you define grief? Like, my mother isn't dead, but like, when I see her wheelchair, I'm grieving a version of my mother who's not here anymore, you know? Like, that version of my mom that I knew growing up will be is gone forever. Because my dad doesn't want to work, and my mom worked until her stroke. I'm the breadwinner of my family. I don't live my life as me, as a creative, as a photographer. I have a degree in it and everything, and I've done so many incredible things. I don't have the luxury to even be like, oh, I want to dream. I want to do this. But I have to kind of play to my strengths and be realistic about things. It's like a generational thing. Now I'm noticing like my mom had to kind of give up a part of her life, like even down to her hands. I'm not sure if I read this somewhere, but my mom's hands are rough. And it's a testament to her always working and never being allowed to be soft. Now I'm seeing that kind of play out in my life. My hands are getting coarser and rougher from handling and processing jewels and fixing broken chains. They're just rougher.
We broke up like 3 months later. I found out Kelvin was using me as a rebound after his last girlfriend dumped him when he transferred out of her high school and she didn't want to do long distance. She lived in Queens and he lived on the Lower East Side. She just didn't want to go out of her way to see him. Anyway, this all to say that it wasn't like we had this like huge, extravagant love. He wasn't my high school sweetheart. He wasn't my first love. After we broke up, the first month of my freshman year, I dated Omar, Alden. 4 people, and each lasted almost a year. We definitely weren't high school sweethearts, and anyone before 21, I forgot their face. So when he died, I didn't cry because I thought I lost a great big love or because I thought of what could have been. He was 14, I was 13, and when he passed away, he was 18, I was 17. And then I kept coming back around to our neighborhood, and I was 20, then 21, then 25, now 27, and he's 17. And I can't imagine him any older than 14. he had a tumor on the back of his neck, and the tumor had cancer, and he had chemo and everything, but it just wiped out his immune system. And right after he got out of the hospital, his grandpa got evicted. Like, he was there for fucking 40 years, and they still found a way to kick him out. But he didn't have a place to go home to, and he couldn't go back to the hospital, and I don't know the full story, but his godfather said that he got caught in the rain and caught a cold, and that's what made him die. I found out when I was hanging out with my cousins. I was in the back seat, and Lorraine called me. She cried on the phone, but I didn't cry because, to be honest, it had been 4 years at that point, so what could I be crying over? It wasn't until I was 21 when I cried. I was walking down 4th, and I passed my dad's bakery, which was closed because of gentrification, and it was becoming this new hipster brunchy restaurant with a grade pending sign. And I realized I didn't recognize a lot of the people on that block. Joe wasn't biking around trying to say hi to anyone who would smile at him. I think he's why I smile. I didn't see Lorraine or Helen there anymore. Helen actually got me this book. It's a first edition Nancy Drew book. Yeah, it is. And I read through it, and I was so afraid of breaking the pages because it's so old. There's an oil stain on it. But when I got to the front of Kelvin's old apartment, I didn't even think about him. I just started tearing up. And when I passed by his godfather's place, I don't even think they lived there anymore. I just burst into tears. I started circling around the block furiously, like tears streaming down my face. And I didn't give a fuck who saw me. It was that kind of cry. I didn't miss him. I just felt so guilty to be here, alive, to be able to forget where I lived, forget this place. I love the Lower East Side, but I also have so much pain here. But also, I can live to put it past me. Kelvin can.
Yeah. Some of them are just where the pictures were taken. These are from some birthday parties when I was a child. The captions here are the words. Here it says rumba. Rumba means party. It's a very Colombian specific word. It technically means party, but usually you talk about it when you're talking about a rave or a very hardcore adult party. Those are not what I would consider the elementary school parties that are right here in this picture. Here she wrote protagonist because I'm a theater major. Well, there I was the theater major, and girl, I was always very dramatic. And that's why I love theater. I remember that during my graduation ceremony, they had played the US anthem. And I thought it was insane that I was in my graduation hearing the US anthem because for my entire life, I grew up in a Colombian event, hearing the Colombian national anthem. And then when they said, okay, we're gonna rise up for the anthem, I was about to sing the Colombian national anthem. But then I heard the first few notes of the US anthem, and it was like a complete whiplash. Even though I've been here for 4 years and completely expected that they were gonna sing the US anthem, I guess I was still expecting to hear the Colombian national anthem. And I think that's when it hit me how different my life is now. Growing up, I never expected to move to the US. I always thought that I was just gonna live in Colombia for my entire life. And the only reason I moved is because I got a scholarship to move here for theater, because there's not a lot of theater in Colombia. I wanted to do that afterwards, to focus on theater for my entire life, but I guess throughout my whole life, I was fully ready to lose theater and not move. I have a new camera. I'm gonna take pictures this whole summer. I can't wait to print them out and put them right here. Like I said before, I love physical pictures. When I was growing up, I loved being able to go through the pictures with my family. When I have kids, I'm gonna be able to do the same thing. I feel like it's not the same effect when you do it on an iPhone or on a computer. To have an actual photo album with you is... I'm only 22, and I moved here permanently. I don't think I'm not going back to Colombia. I also think that it's very fun to compare and contrast, you know? Pictures from my home, from pictures from my friends. You know, pictures from growing up here in the States. I love looking at people's schools here. I love people's pictures because I just think it's so much fun. I love the suburbs here. They look so beautiful. I love looking at the suburbs. And I love showing people from my hometown how everything looks. I think it's because the biggest way that I've ever experienced grief or loss is the loss of my culture and the loss of moving away from that, my home. It's not like death grief, but it's just not being as connected to my home anymore. And having this just reminds me of how things were. I have a horrible memory, and so I don't remember where things were at all. And now I have something that's right here telling me, this is how things looked back then. So I think that this photo album is what best represents it. I think that it's just like, it's like having a funeral. Kind of like having a funeral. You just have to remember things and make sure that the memory keeps on. And I like to have this to check back and remember, and so the memory keeps on and I can go back to the past. I could go back home, but it won't be the same home that they had when I was 8 years old. And it won't be the same view that they have. I'm a very different person now. And the person that I am was pretty much shaped by the past 4 years that I've lived outside of my home country on my own. But this helps me be connected to the person here sometimes, especially, you know? I have theater here.
Okay, wait. Okay, here. It's just a bunch of screenshots of him. Scroll through. There's about 5 total. Yeah, that's all of them. Okay, it's not really all of them. I have multiple copies. I'm worried Instagram will shut down one day or they'll start deleting inactive accounts. And he hasn't logged in since 2019. So, just in case, you know. He died 3 years ago. He was 5 years older than me. We grew up together in Queens. I don't know what happened. We didn't follow each other on Instagram, and then one day he just followed me. And I hadn't come out, you know, no one knew. And he just asked me, what does it mean to you to be queer? And I was so scared, but he just made me feel so comfortable. He did everything for me. He would take me trick-or-treating every Halloween. In 7th grade, he helped me apply for high schools. And he got a full ride scholarship into a really good school. And he lived in Shanghai for a bit. My brother told me he had a boyfriend. I didn't really believe him because no one from our community was out like that. I wasn't even out like that. And he was the perfect boy. He had good grades. He was learning English and Mandarin. He knew the Quran, and we had high hopes for him. He was going to achieve a lot. He had a bright future. We got a call from his brother he jumped off a building. We told everybody he had a heart attack, so the mosque would pay for the funeral. It's weird. Anytime I was worried about my future, I just looked at him eating at lavish restaurants in his powder blue shirt. He was reading a Asian American New York Times bestseller. I'm his age when he died, and I'm here, and he isn't. In a couple of years, I won't know what's next for me. I don't know what 25 years old will look for me. I don't know what anything beyond now will look for me. I once asked him what it meant to him to be Indonesian, and this is what he said to me. I met a group of rich Indonesian kids in China. They were speaking Bahasa and joked around and made all of these cultural references I didn't understand. Even though I look Indonesian and was included in their group, I didn't have the language capabilities or the experiences to bond with them on a very deep level. I'm very proud of my Indonesian heritage, but I feel very fragmented. I'm not religious. I don't keep up with Indonesian pop culture. Yes, I like Bali. I like the food, and I have family there. But that's pretty much it. I don't feel tied to the culture aside from my family. It's easier for me to just travel and live abroad because I'm not very tied to one specific place. I wish he liked Queens as much as I do now. He always talked about how everyone stays painfully the same, but that's part of the beauty of it, except the homophobic part. We had the same childhood friends. It was his family, my family, and another family. We were all cousins. When my uncle from my third family died, my father said it was like they were the same soul, they just had different names. And I feel like I connect to my heritage because these people are constants in my life. I ended up going to a fried chicken spot with all of my friends, and we talked about him, why he died, what made him jump, how he didn't want to be a burden on anybody. And we also talked about all the internet videos we would watch for hours on end, and how one of us wanted to become this big Asian star, famous abroad, and we laughed for hours. I loved these people. I loved him. I loved his brothers. And for 2 decades, simply because of how our fathers connected and got along and did stupid shit in Queens all those years ago, before they even thought of us existing.
My dad is really into health stuff. All my brothers and I have astigmatism, and all my brothers are deathly afraid of bugs. But my dad always blames our genes on my mom's side of the family. He always pushes us to eat only halal and drink organic juices, and says that that's how we'll combat my mom's side. So my mom, she has diabetes, and now she has to take insulin shots. And it's a thing where, like, little things are happening now. Like, she's really strong, but she gets woozy if she gets up too fast, and she can't lift certain things anymore, and her blood pressure drops by a lot. Her blood sugar spikes up. She's in bed a lot more than she used to, and it's, I don't know, like, I think about her dreams and what she wanted to be, and I think a lot about how the pressure of being a mom made her set that aside. Yeah, she was a petroleum engineer back home, and then she came here, and they were like, hey, unless you go back to school and all over again, your degree and work experience don't count. And my dad told her, don't do that, take care of the kids. I was sobbing when I asked my mom, like, do you think, like, being a mom, like, let your dreams down because you didn't get to work? And she smiled and she said, in a way, yes, but also I didn't want to work either. Your dad said stay home, and so I happily stayed home. Yeah, that's funny, but like, I don't know. I've seen photos of her when she was working there, and she smiled bigger than she ever has in my entire life. My dad is not a reliable person. After the bakery closed down because of gentrification and all the yuppies raising prices on rent, she still ended up being the breadwinner. And I think it's the thing where, like you were saying, I think in Asian culture, the matriarch always ends up being the one doing everything. Men are kind of an afterthought. It's like, you have to fulfill the role of being married, but you also can't depend on your husband. My mom held the cleaning and a job after the bakery closed, and he just cheated on her and went off, and we were almost homeless because he was behind on rent. You're taught that men are not dependable. Yeah. My dad always boasts about health. Like, he's very into organic juices and eating fish and eating only halal meat because it's natural, and he drones on. My dad is pretty healthy for his age, but I think it's hard for me to take his advice because, like, there's a part of me that's like, well, is that why you're healthy, or is it because you never did anything as stressful or strenuous as my mom? He did end up working at some point from 5 a.m. to like 5 p.m. But the thing is now, like,